the last several days. Chief Story I had invited to be here today. He had another commitment, and I'm sure he would like to be here himself. I want to tell all of you just a few things. Chief Story and I had lunch a couple of weeks ago with Fernando Macias. That's not the first time we've done that. I encourage all of you all to do the same thing, to meet with your chiefs of police and your district attorneys when you have the chance to do it. I hope you get the same response I've had from the Las Cruces Police Department. I've got to tell you, I sometimes we all brag about our local communities and so forth. I hope these gentlemen are going to tell us a little bit about it, but Las Cruces Police has really done amazing things in my perspective in the last few years. I hope you all are as encouraged and enthused as I've seen. You just recently did a lunchbox program of some kind. You know, I'm not using the right terminology, I guess, but you're having open houses to the community. You're inviting community to come in and meet with you all in town halls and in informal settings, and that's the same kind of thing that I've enjoyed with your chief to discuss the crime issue. And initially, when him and I got to know each other a couple of years ago for the first time or early on, I think that he, like probably a lot of people in law enforcement, thought that we were the enemy, that the legislature was the adversaries, that we were passing civil rights laws so you all could be sued. And that was not true. You all were misled to believe that. There were various other things that were done that I think began to make, law enforcement body cameras and so forth feel that we were the adversaries, and I really regret that, but I really do believe that working with your chief here, that is something that maybe he appreciates is not really the case, and I hope that's what you're going to get out of the hearing today, is to having you here. I've asked you to, I've given you a very broad topic, and we've got an hour to talk about it. I called it the revolving door, but I do genuinely believe that we've demoralized, in some respects, law enforcement. Not willingly, but we've demoralized you all because you're used to seeing people picked up, arrested, charged, taken into the system and released, and then turned back around and doing it all over again. And I can understand where that, to me, would be demoralizing. Maybe that's what you're going to tell me. Maybe that's not what you're going to tell me, but that's what I've assumed is the case, and I can understand it. And I can understand that maybe it contributes to why we don't have retention that we'd like. We don't have attraction to the profession that we'd like. I do this at some peril. A couple of weeks ago, I was driving beyond the speed limit on my way to Santa Fe. Happens, unfortunately, sadly. I'll own up to it. I was stopped by a state police officer, a young woman. She was probably about 35, north of Truth or Consequences, and I talked to her for some time after I dealt with my speeding issue, and I asked her, we just had a presentation on why we can't recruit and hold law enforcement officers, and asked her why she thought that might be, and she said it's because of the way we're treated. She said that was her issue. So I thought that was pretty telling and pretty legitimate, and so we'd like to hear from you all how you're treated by us, how you're treated by the community, and the courts, and why perhaps from your perspective we have this revolving door in crime. And so the floor is yours, gentlemen.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. First of all, I'd like to say thank you for having us here today and give us the opportunity to present and speak on this topic. My name is Mark Renteria. I'm a sergeant with the Las Cruces Police Department. I've been there for about 15 years. I've held a number of positions, including specialized positions within the gang unit and the Metro Narcotics Task Force as a narcotics investigator. Currently, I'm the supervisor for the Street Crimes Unit. It's a very small unit, but very dedicated, talented, and knowledgeable officers that dedicate their time day in and day out combating issues that directly affect the safety and security of our communities. Additionally, we're federally deputized task force officers through the FBI. We work through the Southern New Mexico Safe Streets Gang Task Force Initiative. That gives us the ability to conduct federal investigations and charge criminally at the federal level. One of the biggest issues we deal with is what we're going to talk about is juvenile crime, specifically violent juvenile crime. My partner, and he'll get to introduce himself here in a second, has a very informative presentation about it. I would argue that he's probably one of the top minds definitely within our jurisdiction as far as violent juvenile crime is concerned, and possibly within the state of New Mexico. So I'll turn it over to Officer Burling.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, thank you again for having us. My name is Officer Benjamin Burling. I've been with the Las Cruces Police Department for about 10 years. Just like Sergeant Renteria said, over the last few years, a big focus for us has been violent juvenile crime. The emphasis is on the violence. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to give you guys our perspective as law enforcement on what is truly happening out in our communities. It's not a Las Cruces problem. This is a statewide, a nationwide problem. And I hope that this presentation kind of helps shed some light on the reality of the situation. I apologize in advance. I would say this is probably not the most ideal situation for the PowerPoint to be behind some of you guys. We do have several videos and things that I'd like for you guys to see as best as you can. So just bear with me on that, all right? Yes, sir.
We have, you said the PowerPoint's behind us, but we have the handout with those slides, number one. I'm noting that they don't have page numbers on them. This is kind of a common problem we have here too. So if you're referring to something, if you could at least by the title or something identify it so we can keep up with you, okay?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
So I'm going to have my lovely assistant here, Nancy. She's going to help me with the microphone over here by the projector so that you guys can hear clearly the things that are being said during the videos, because the audio is extremely important in a lot of these cases. A quick disclaimer on this presentation. There is going to be depictions of violence, firearms, and extremely vulgar language. So viewer discretion is advised in that regard. We've done our best to protect the identities of the people shown in the presentation, but nobody is perfect. A quick overview on the presentation. We're going to talk about the mindset of the juvenile offenders that we're dealing with specifically down here in Las Cruces. And again, this is a nationwide trend. The problems that we have with the current system that Mr. Chair, you alluded to, and some of the frustrations that we have. And then we're going to talk about legislative solutions, I think, that we can explore in the next session to try and alleviate the issue. So to start, this is not an issue with kids being kids or kids doing innocuous things or innocent things, taking pictures with guns or just trying to act cool. This is an issue where kids are killing each other, killing themselves, and killing innocent bystanders. And it's happening repeatedly. These are just some newspaper clippings from just down here in Las Cruces over the last couple of years. This isn't going back. This is not reaching back very far at all. People are getting killed by these juveniles. And often the people being killed are juveniles. It's a crisis that we're in down here in Doña Ana County, in Las Cruces, throughout the state, throughout the nation. So some of the escalation of behaviors that we typically see in these instances is it starts off innocent enough, is kids find guns and they'll take pictures with them. Often they'll come across those guns by burglarizing vehicles, burglarizing houses, stealing them from their friends and their family, and then posing with them, taking the pictures, taking the videos with them, posting them on their social media accounts, which if that was where it ended, it would not be a crisis, right? The next step in this escalation typically is then they will begin getting into arguments over the internet, right? They'll start claiming gang sets. They'll create their own gangs. They'll start affiliating with gangs that they see their parents associate with or their immediate family or their friends. They'll get in those arguments over gang ties, drugs, money. Those arguments over the internet spill over into real life. Now they're in altercations where they're beating each other up with bottles, with brass knuckles, sending people to the hospital, causing great bodily harm. We start seeing videos of increasingly risky behavior on these social media accounts because ultimately a big driver of this is that social media clout, that internet clout, that gangster lifestyle that they so glorify and glamorize. They're chasing that and they can never get enough. They can never get enough respect or street cred to validate themselves. They're always looking for something more. So we see more and more risky behavior in these instances. Shooting in public places, shooting at parks, shooting from motor vehicles, beating on people and recording it, posting it to their social media accounts. Drive-by shootings. These drive-bys are often in retaliation for these altercations that took place at a house party or at a public park or wherever that were then preceded by the arguments over the internet. And often somebody is killed as a result of these drive-by shootings, right? Oftentimes it's the intended target. More frequently than is necessary, it's somebody that was innocent that was caught in the crosshairs. Because as you guys will see in this video or in this presentation, there is a disturbing lack of regard for anybody else's safety or security in the community. So again, this is how it starts, with just taking pictures, posting them on their social media accounts because they want that clout, that social media credit, right? They'll take those pictures, they'll post them, and they want to look cool. And again, if this is where it ended, we wouldn't be in the situation that we're in right now. Posing with machine guns, there's a Glock switch there, there's a Glock switch in the middle. Those machine guns, we just passed that law in the last legislative session. You guys passed that law in the last legislative session banning those weapon conversion devices, right? And that's a powerful step forward because it empowers us as local law enforcement to deal with that part of the problem. Nancy. Thank you. That one actually doesn't have any video. So here's a video of a young man, I think he's 15 or 16 at the time this video is taken, shooting at Young Park here in Las Cruces. This park is surrounded on all four sides by residences, apartment buildings, and a middle school. He's just shooting rounds with, again, no due regard for anybody else in that area. Those bullets are landing somewhere. This isn't just innocent behavior. Those bullets are hitting something at the back end. Now, Nancy, sorry. That's a video of a young man with a Glock switch with a machine gun shooting out of a car as it's driving around downtown Las Cruces.
Ready? Yeah. This is the car, this is the car, this is the car. Hey, just shoot that bitch. Shoot that bitch. Alright, let the cousin shoot it, let the cousin shoot it. Should I shoot window, cuz, hurry? Right here, up front, up front. Nigga, come on. Oh! Hey, spin the torch on that.
So again, in that instance, they're driving in Las Cruces, they're shooting at electrical transformers, they're shooting across the interstate in the middle of the night. On the other side of that interstate, in the direction that they're shooting, is a bunch of neighborhoods. Sorry, this next video is the same thing. They are obsessed with shooting out of motor vehicles in residential neighborhoods, again, for retaliation, for internet clout, any number of reasons, but there is no regard for anybody's right to be safe in the community.
On the sevens, bitch. Go, 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 go.
That was in the middle of the day in Las Cruces, in the middle of the afternoon, perfectly daylight, plenty of people around. They don't care. They don't care who sees them. They don't care who gets hurt. There was probably about 50 shell casings that were recovered on that scene because of the Glock switch that was used, shooting at the cars, shooting at the drywall, shooting into the house. Again, all because of this gangster lifestyle that they're trying to emulate and glorify and live up to. In this particular case, kids are also bringing guns to school. This is at Oregon Mountain High School. I think you're good. I don't think this one has any sound. Last August, these kids brought guns to school as part of their drug dealing that they were doing, flashing the money, flashing the drugs, flashing the guns that they're bringing. We were able to locate these kids on campus within 15, 20 minutes of them creating the social media post, and they were charged and convicted federally. Here's the guns that they brought. Both of them were loaded, and the drugs and the money that they were making in the middle of the school. In this particular instance, a marked police unit was burglarized. They stole a gun out of there that was actually locked up in a safe inside the car. They still managed to break into it, steal the gun, and then posting that they're ready for war. This is a mobile gun battle. Again, downtown Las Cruces, middle of the day, between two cars, two rival gang members, all of them juveniles, shooting at each other in a running gun battle through the neighborhoods. This next slide is a jail call. In this jail call, this young man is bragging about a shooting that he committed, bragging about how he shot another child in the back, paralyzing him, and bragging about how the case was dropped and how he wasn't prosecuted, how he got away with it.
Stuck a gun at my brother.
I'll start it over now that we got. Sorry. Thanks, Nancy.
He's a plug. Oh, no. You can ask. I can't speak on that case. I can't because it got dropped. That shooting case got dropped, but he stuck a gun at my brother's face. So I fucking went from the back window and I shot him. Boom, boom. I started shooting at him. I hit that boy in the back. He crashed. Paralyzed forever. His bitch is wiping his ass at this second while we're talking. I put that. You can look that shit up on the news.
This bitch is wiping his eye.
It's another drive-by. This is another jail call. Bragging about beating another child, thinking that he killed him because he beat him so badly that he had broken hands, broken feet from beating another child.
So you only got one charge on you right now. They dropped you. Hey, is that fool still alive or what? That fool at the fucking park?
Junior?
No, fucking. We need to put in the bottle.
Oh. Yeah, he is. Yeah, I thought I killed him, nigga.
That's what I was.
Beat that nigga to death.
Anyway,
Gee, I got scars on my hand from that nigga, fool.
fucking broke your hand and shit.
Broke my hand and my fucking foot on that.
This is talking about shooting another child with an AR-15 5 times, bragging about it, laughing about how funny it was when his body hit the floor after being shot.
Because I upped it, and he was like this. So I was like, are we good or what? And he started laughing. I was like, hi.
Oh, he
So I
played
started
it as a
laughing.
joke, huh?
Huh?
Played it as a joke, like when he put up his hands?
Yeah, and he started laughing. So I started laughing while I was busting at the nigga. And I was laughing when his body dropped. He wasn't laughing after his body dropped. Nigga was screaming for his life.
Fucking brother, bro.
Nigga, go on Facebook. Go to Las Cruces Community Watch. You can hear that nigga screaming in the video.
For real?
When the cops were all, like, looking at him, he's like, nah, fuck that. He fucking hit me.
Well,
He's like, that shit hurt.
This next one is a video of a group of juveniles beating on a grown man. They're armed with rifles. They pull his pants down, they take his shoes, they take his belt, and they leave him there battered and bloodied. Posted to their social media account, again, for that clout.
Hey, it's not attempted murder. I didn't shoot him up above the waist. It's aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. My girl's mom told me that. She Googled it and everything. She's going to tell my attorney and all that. It's not attempted murder.
These are some messages that we recovered during some search warrants on social media accounts and on cell phones. Again, demonstrating the propensity for violence. I shoot for no reason. I'll double tap him with that AR. I'll put this AR tip in your eye socket. The propensity for violence that they're seeking it's outrageous and disturbing. This is how they feel about the judicial system in New Mexico. They say they'll only get 8 years at most in New Mexico for murder. That's nothing. They don't care. This next couple of slides, it doesn't show up great on that screen, and I apologize, but you can reference it on the handout. This is going to demonstrate a few cases in which case we've dealt with the same juvenile over and over and over in New Mexico with failed prosecutions on the state side. We were successfully able to prosecute them federally and have been able to hold them accountable as part of that process. And again, that's part of the FBI task force that we're attached to that has helped facilitate that. In this particular instance, this is the child that was bragging about shooting that kid with the AR-15 5 times, laughing about how funny it was when his body dropped, laughing about beating that child with a bottle, thinking that he killed him. He's been charged with battery, possession of a handgun, negligent use of a deadly weapon, aggravated battery causing great bodily harm, attempted murder. He was a suspect in numerous auto thefts, robberies, and shootings at a dwelling, drive-by shootings.
Before you move on,
Yes.
so for the committee's clarity, when you see these various charges, this individual going back in 2021, when you see Noli. Noli is a term of art that everybody made. So I want to make sure that everyone's familiar with the term Noli. Noli, not being a criminal lawyer, but Noli is a decision by the prosecutor not to continue with the prosecution. Is that what you're intending by your slide?
Yes, that's correct. In this particular instance, there was, and we'll discuss issues that are not centric to the system. There's a myriad of problems that we need to overcome. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So again, in this particular case, this child had a lengthy criminal history, a lengthy violent criminal history. We were not able, for a myriad of reasons, to successfully prosecute him on the state side. He was charged federally for a crime of cyberstalking when he threatened to kill his girlfriend and showed up at her doorstep with a handgun and threatened to kill her and everybody else inside. We were able to successfully prosecute that in the federal side, and he was convicted and sentenced until his 18th birthday for incarceration and then placed on a term of probation until his 21st birthday. So in this particular case, it was approximately 3 years of incarceration followed by an additional 3 years of probation for that case. These next couple of slides are for one child. All of his cases were nollied because he was incompetent to stand trial. So when Mr. Chair talks about the decision not to prosecute, that comes from the basis that this child was found repeatedly over and over and over not competent to stand trial. And that's one of the holes that we'll discuss later in the system that we do have. So looking at this, I'll give you guys a second to look at it, but unlawful carrying of a deadly weapon, residential burglary, unlawful taking of a motor vehicle, resisting an officer, criminal damage to property, larceny of a firearm, battery, aggravated battery with a deadly weapon, resisting an officer, battery on a police officer, escape from the custody of a peace officer, resisting an officer. And another instance where he was suspected but not charged of shooting at a motor vehicle or auto theft. And when I say suspected, not charged, that means we're getting information that they're responsible for certain shootings, but we can't meet the burden of proof to necessarily prosecute it. So that's not to say that they're guilty of that, but given the totality of things, there's strong evidence to suggest that they are involved in those things, like those shootings and those auto thefts. This is one of the children that brought a gun to Oregon Mountain High School last August, and he was charged federally for that offense. They raised competency on the federal side. He was evaluated through the federal system, found competent to stand trial, and convicted. He was sentenced to incarceration until his 18th birthday and probation until his 21st birthday. Again, the next couple of slides here demonstrate a lengthy criminal history for another child. Unlawful carrying of a deadly weapon, auto burglary, auto theft, resisting an officer, auto theft, aggravated assault, burglary, resisting an officer, shooting from a motor vehicle causing injury, resisting an officer, aggravated assault, deadly weapon, shooting at a motor vehicle causing injury, resisting an officer, auto theft, resisting an officer, auto burglary where he broke into a marked police unit and stole a firearm. This child in particular managed to rack up 25 felony charges and 24 misdemeanor charges between the age of 12 and 17. And every single one of them was dismissed because he was found incompetent to stand trial over and over and over again. So when we talk about a revolving door, this is that revolving door. A child is arrested, he's charged, and then they're released with no consequences, no treatment, no alternative. They're released as if nothing happened to reoffend. And often that reoffense is an escalation in behavior. It gets worse. It does not get better with time. When we do nothing and there are no consequences and there is no treatment, they get worse. And the community is the ones that suffer because of it. So that's the bad. That's the mindset of these kids, right? These children, and that's not every child, certainly not every child, but the ones that we are dealing with most frequently from our perspective are problems. They're the ones that are creating this crisis, this violent crime crisis, killing each other, hurting innocent people. So we'll take a few minutes to talk about proposed legislative solutions. Now, I'll preface this by saying I am not a legislature. I don't write laws for a living. You guys have some proposed basic drafts attached to the handouts as something, a jump off point, right? I'm sure there's plenty of things to chew on through all the committees and the way that these things get signed into law. But I wanted to give you, again, our perspective on a good jump off point for some of this updated legislature. The number one hole that we see systemically is the issues with competency. And that was a big topic for House Bill 8 last year in the last legislative session. And I think there was a lot of strides made in the right direction for that, but it all really pertained to adults and the language that the way that it was written. They talk about defendants, not respondents, and that's particular to children versus adults. So I think it would be a very simple fix to update the language, but the language in the children's code needs to be updated so that the competency proceedings mirror that closer to House Bill 8, where it's not just a finding of incompetency followed by a dismissal. There should be alternatives. There should be treatment options. If somebody is truly incompetent, they should be able to be treated to competency. And then once they're treated to competency, they should be able to stand trial for the crimes for which they are charged. If that cannot be accomplished, if they are so unwell that they cannot possibly be treated to competency, there should be other avenues for us to seek rather than dismissal and releasing them back into the community to reoffend. This is a child that's discussing the competency examination. He knows he's going home. He knows the case will get dropped, and he knows he'll be out soon to go and do the things that he does. In speaking with my associates, my colleagues, the people that I work with at the U.S. Attorney's Office, every child that they have sent for competency evaluation through the federal system has been deemed competent to stand trial. Now, I'm not privy to the information that is put out or evaluated during these evaluations. I'm not a licensed therapist, psychologist, or psychiatrist, but there's clearly a discrepancy in the way that those evaluations are happening at the federal level versus at the state level. And there needs to be a middle ground. There needs to be something that we can do, that you guys can do as the legislature to help alleviate this problem, because this is a giant glaring hole. And it's no secret for these kids. They talk amongst themselves. They discuss malingering. That child that was just on the jail call right now talking about how he's going to beat the case is the same one that had 24 felonies and 25 misdemeanors in 5 years as a kid that was found incompetent over and over and over again in the state of New Mexico. He was found, not only was he found competent in the federal system, he was found to be malingering in the federal system, meaning he was essentially faking it, playing dumb or attempting to play dumb so that he would be found incompetent so that he could go home. Some additional piece of updated legislation that we think could be helpful for us. The legislator passed this bill a couple of years ago, unlawful sale of a firearm without a background check. Basically, this is a misdemeanor for a private party to sell or transfer guns between themselves without conducting a background check. I think this update to this statute here, where you specifically prohibit the transfer sale of firearms knowingly to a prohibited person, meaning a convicted felon, somebody convicted of domestic violence, any number of things. There's a lot of things that prohibit people from possessing firearms, and one of them here in the state of New Mexico is being under the age of 19 when it comes to handguns. I think additional penalties should apply for somebody that knowingly gives, trades, transfers, sells, whatever, to a prohibited person. And an additional penalty should apply on top of that, an enhancement, if that gun is then used in the furtherance of a violent crime. So if an adult, for instance, say, sells a juvenile a handgun and then go and commit a drive-by shooting, that person that sold the gun should be held responsible in the same way that recently the statute for negligently allowing a minor to access a firearm, right, which was more tailored in its language and its intent, I think, for parents to lock up their guns in their house to keep their kids from stealing them. The same, where we're holding people accountable for letting those guns fall into the wrong hands, should apply here. There's a lot of text on this page. This is the statute for the unlawful possession of a handgun by a person under 19. Now, I don't expect you necessarily to read everything on this page, but this is the list of exceptions where it is lawful for a child under 19 to possess a handgun. And these make perfect sense. Hunting, competition shooting, target shooting, under the supervision of their parent or grandparent in their own home. Those things make sense. I think an update to this language would be helpful to prohibit children under the age of 18 from also possessing a shotgun or a rifle. And I say 18 because once they're 18, they can lawfully purchase a shotgun or a rifle. But the logic is the same. We use this unlawful possession of a handgun by a person under 19 daily throughout the state, all the time, because these kids with these guns are going and committing crimes. And if we're able to keep them from possessing them, except under all of these circumstances, there's plenty of ways for for kids under 19 to lawfully own these guns. But this is not how they are using the guns. A kid that's in a ski mask driving around at midnight with all of his friends with AR-15s and shotguns and machine guns in the backseat of the car does not fall under one of these exceptions for this statute. I think it makes logical sense to extend that to the shotguns and the rifles that they're still using for the drive-by shootings and the murders for anybody under the age of 18. There's plenty of exceptions for them to lawfully possess it, but I think taking that same protection that we get from prohibiting them from owning a handgun under 19 logically extends to prohibiting a handgun under 18. Or I'm sorry, a rifle or a shotgun or a long gun, because here's the reality. Again, they're not just using handguns. They're using rifles. They're using AK-47s, AR-15s, shotguns, short-barreled rifles. They're using all of these things in the middle of a parking lot downtown Las Cruces. They're using these guns to commit violence. There's plenty of ways for them to lawfully possess those things, but that's not how they're using them. I think it is helpful to explore investing in and empowering juvenile probation officers as a part of the CYFD initiative. I think the system that we have right now with juvenile probation officers being able to take enforcement action is extremely inefficient. It lacks the ability to hold kids accountable who are on formal probation, meaning they've been adjudicated of a crime and they've been placed on formal probation, or kids that have been informally placed under the supervision of a juvenile probation officer pending their case, put on conditions of release. But as it stands right now, it is a very slow, inefficient process for a child who's on probation to violate that probation, and then for the filing of that probation violation to occur. Essentially, the JPO will file a notice with the district attorney's office. The district attorney's office will make a determination on whether they are going to file charges in that case. If they do, they will have a hearing with the children's court. The children's court judge will then make a determination on whether a warrant will be issued for that violation, or if the child, if they're not in custody already, will receive different conditions of release, conditions of probation, or any other sanctions. That process, at its quickest, typically takes at least 1 to 2 weeks. If we look at the adult side of things, and again, children are treated very differently from adults in the system, and it should be. But there's some things I think that concessions can be made on when it comes to trying to alleviate the violent crime crisis. On the adult side, if a person on probation is found to be drunk, for instance, and they're violating their, it would not be a law, breaking the law for them to be drunk otherwise, but if they're under probation, we find them drunk or smoking marijuana or something like that, that would otherwise be lawful except for the fact that they're violating their probation, I could call their probation officer directly. They would run it up their chain within their office, and an arrest order could be placed essentially immediately for the probation violation. And then they would be taken to jail, they would see a judge, and then the judge would make a determination on detention. And I believe that process, empowering the juvenile probation officers to have similar authority, would be helpful for this crisis, because again, here's the reality of it. These next few slides are all kids that when these posts were made, these pictures were taken, These are kids that were actively on formal probation, meaning, again, they were adjudicated of a crime, placed on probation, said, don't do any more crime, and they don't care because there's no consequences. Here they are posing with guns, posting videos of them doing shootings at a dwelling in a residential neighborhood in Las Cruces, posting numerous guns, machine guns, Glock switches, stolen rifles. The child on the right has 4 or 5 guns on his person right there. And you, if you know who that child is, if you're his probation officer, you know who that child is. That should be a very immediate course correction, ideally, in our opinion, in my opinion. We should be able to course correct that as soon as that information is found, as soon as there is a finding of probable cause that this child has committed a violation of the probation. The ability for a juvenile probation officer to, with certain limitations and restrictions that I think need to be reasonable, issue an arrest order, take that child before a judge, take them to jail, judge sees them as soon as possible within 24 hours, whatever the reasonable amount of time would be, to make a determination on detention, continued detention, or release with enhanced conditions of release or conditions of probation. Where'd Nancy go? This is another jail call where they're discussing basically the lack of accountability from the juvenile probation office. When he's talking about a watch, he's discussing an ankle monitor. He says you can't do much with that watch and you can't really do anything because you have that ankle monitor on you.
Fuck yeah, G, bro. We can at least get lit or something, you know?
Yeah, fuck yeah, we'll turn up, we'll drink or something.
I mean, you can't do that much with that fucking watch you got right there.
Yeah, I can. They don't do nothing to me. They don't test me.
Oh, no, huh?
Nothing. Till I'm court.
Fuck.
I'm just on 24/7 house arrest. I can do whatever.
Nigga. I wish. I fucking wish.
This is a continuation of that same conversation.
How many times do they don't drug test you at all, nothing?
At all. I'm just on house arrest.
Is your GPO on your ass though or nah?
She's cool as fuck with me, cuz. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah, my ankle monitor stays charged and I'm good. That's all I do.
Hopefully I come out with something like that way, cause low-key, I don't feel like being sober out there.
Nah, facts. Fuck that.
So moving on, an additional update to the current statute for telephonic harassment. This is actually a bill that Representative Reed introduced in the last session. It got stuck on the floor before the end of the session. It didn't ultimately pass, but updating the telephonic harassment statute to include digital communication, meaning texts, video calls, social media content, that would empower law enforcement to take enforcement action when you have instances where somebody is sending a violent, threatening, grotesque text message, video call, things of that nature that may not rise to a established pattern of conduct as mandated by the actual harassment statute. The telephonic harassment statute is a standalone. It's a single instance could be charged, but the way the law is written currently, it is pretty explicit about it being related to telephone calls. And that's mostly because the statute was written many decades ago prior to digital communication being as prevalent as it is now. Lastly, I think it would be helpful to enact sentencing enhancements for gang activity. And what this would require would be defining what a criminal street gang is, defining what gang activity is, and then creating reasonable sentencing enhancements for both adults and juveniles. Because as I told you at the beginning of the presentation, they idolize and glamorize and glorify that street gangster lifestyle. Many of the violent crimes that are committed are in furtherance of gang activity. They create their own gangs. Seems they make a different gang every week almost. But they are groups of these kids that are committing these crimes in furtherances of those groups. They'll have common names, they'll have common taggings, common colors, ways that they identify themselves as part of this gang. And as if they were reading it from a manual, part of that problem or part of the part and parcel of being a gang member is you have to have problems with rival gang members. And then those problems with those rival gang members turn into fights and shootings and murders. So I believe that finding ways to disincentivize that kind of a lifestyle would be powerful for helping us to combat this issue, this violent crime crisis. Because again, down here in Las Cruces, as well as throughout the state, we have gangs. Gangs are a problem. Street gangs that these kids see their parents engaging in, their uncles, their aunts, their brothers, their sisters, and then it trickles down and they get younger and younger and younger every year. I want to take a brief moment to highlight the fact that no matter what, there will always be human failures. There will always be a parent that failed in some regard to raise their child. There will always be a police officer that failed to properly do an investigation. There will always be a prosecutor that failed to properly prosecute. There will be a presiding judge that failed to make a legally correct decision or a morally correct decision. There will always be human failures. But I do believe that we as a group, you guys as the legislature, us as law enforcement, have an obligation to be imperfect humans working in an imperfect system. But we can work to create that system and improve it to mitigate the issues of those mistakes. Those mistakes will happen. But if we can find ways to mitigate them or the effect that they have, especially on the children, that is an obligation that we all hold. Because again, this is not kids that are taking pictures with guns. This is not kids that are not harming people. People are dying. Kids are dying. And so that's why it's important. So with that, we'll stand for questions.
So hands, questions? Anyone? This side? Romero and others? And Chavez, Chavez. On my left, anyone else on my left side? Nope. I'm Brantley. Back to my right. Okay, Paul. And Chavez. A. Reeve. And Senator Trujillo, right? All right. We've got about an hour, gang. I'm going to recognize everybody for arbitrarily. No. We'll do everybody. We should have time for 6 minutes each. So Representative Romero, you're first for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation. In compilation, it's, with the headlines that you pose, I think when we heard the news about the mass shooting here in Las Cruces, everybody was terrorized by it and absolutely horrible seeing what I think many of us saw with the social media representations of kids carrying AR-15s and other, weapons of war that are on these streets of our communities every single day. And for the law enforcement that are out there on the front lines, and as we try to regulate our way into understanding how this happens, we've certainly tried to figure out how to target the weapons, which are deadly weapons that could, as we saw, do extremely quick damage to an entire community. That's one side of the coin. The other is, as you bring up, how it is that we are able to functionally detain children, juveniles, in these situations that holds them both accountable and maintains that they as minors have rights. And one of the things that you brought up on competency is this difference between the state and federal evaluation. Do we have any knowledge, Mr. Chair, about what those differences are? Thank you for posing that question. As something that we could follow through on as to how those evaluations are taking place, and have we had any comparative study on that? Does anybody know?
Mr. Chair, Representative, I don't know. I am not privy to any of the information on how those competency evaluations are conducted. I do know that down here in Doña Ana County, for juveniles specifically, I'm not sure if they use the same evaluators for adults as they do for juveniles, but I will speak as for juveniles. I'm talking with the DA's office. When competency is raised, they typically pick they have really one evaluator that they typically will use. Sometimes they have an alternate, but in nearly all of the incidences where that evaluation is raised, the finding is of incompetency. I don't know what the distinction is, if there is a distinction at the legal level, if they're usually using different criteria, or if it's just a different perspective from a different person. I wish I could tell you. I don't know what the answer is for that, but it is clearly an issue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that's something that this committee, I think, would benefit from, and understanding if this is one of those holes in the system for us to hold folks accountable, minors, juveniles accountable. I think that's really critically important if there is a misalignment. One of the other questions, Mr. Chair, that we consistently try to ask is, how do these children get guns? How are they even both exposed and or able to obtain these weapons? Understanding that if we're looking at unlawful sale of a firearm with a background check, or those possessing firearms under the age of 18, we can keep raising the age to any number of ways, but what is the cause of those crimes being able to be persistent throughout the state and the nation, perhaps, because this is not just us.
Mr. Chair, Madam Representative, so the primary ways that they get their hands on these guns is they commit burglaries. Unfortunately, a lot of people who own firearms aren't always the most responsible with them. Oftentimes they're left in their cars, oftentimes they're left in cars that are unlocked. That's not always the case. Oftentimes the cars are locked. If there's a gun in there, sometimes they will break out the windows and find ways in there. Other times they will steal them from friends or family. If they go to a friend's house and they know that the friend's parents own guns that are maybe in a case under their bed or in a safe that the child may know the combination to for some reason or another, that's how typically they're getting their hands on those guns. But I would say the most common method is certainly auto burglaries. If we could find a way to solve that problem, to keep people from leaving guns in their cars and their cars unlocked, I think we would see a dramatic reduction in the number of guns that are available in the streets. But that is an entirely separate issue.
Sure. I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're trying to find ways that make sense, and these just make my head spin when we're thinking about how these weapons end up in the hands of folks wanting to commit these crimes, and the videos are super disturbing. I'm really interested in trying to figure out how we can look at some of the laws on the books, and I appreciate my colleague with having these widely exposed, if it's clout too, that they're getting out of this too, that these things can be seen on the internet. These are minors. It's wild to me that this can be on Snap or, whatever it is that's providing this opportunity to build clout. And then, of course, when we talk about the crimes committed, I know we have need to fix our juvenile justice system. I think there's a lot of proposals, and I know we're going to be discussing them at length. But there are all these different holes that you identify here that I think in particular when we look at gun safety, something I've been working on for years, would love to work on how to tighten up these laws so again we can keep these mechanisms in place that allow for folks to be accountable to, again, proper gun use and storage. With that, Mr. Chair, I would love to continue the conversation about competency in a future hearing as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
And I'll just note, members, I hope you'll be able to be here again tomorrow. A lot of these topics that we're addressing here today are going to be resumed again tomorrow when we bring back District Attorney Macias, because I think he's going to give the prosecutor's perspective. I hope maybe you all can join us. I know you've had law enforcement here for a couple of days, but I'm realizing as I put together the agenda now, I should have had you all paired with the district attorney and with judges, frankly, and so maybe we'll find a way to do that down the road. Representative Eleanor Chavez, 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I have a bunch of questions. So you talked about kids who have been deemed not competent to stand trial. And the question that I have, you made a comment about, treating them to competency and then basically then they would be able to stand trial. But my question is really more around those kids who are not competent. And I think you gave an example of one child who had been deemed incompetent a number of times. So why isn't there any kind of follow-up treatment? Something is not going well with these kids. Have we tried to figure out what it is? I mean, do the evaluations, I don't know if they're psychological or psychiatric evaluations, have those evaluations shed any light in terms of what might be some options for treatment for these kids?
Mr. Chair, Representative, again, I'm not privy to how these evaluations are conducted. There's HIPAA laws in place that prohibit me from being able to review the findings in a lot of these evaluations, especially because they're minors. And because of my position as a law enforcement officer, I'm not privy to all the details that the prosecutor's office or the defense attorney or the judge has access to. So I don't know if they're psychological or psychiatric evaluations necessarily. In terms of treating somebody to competency or the lack of follow-up for that, I'm not sure what the cause is or what the reason for the lack of follow-through there is. Unfortunately, that's separate from my role as a police officer. That would fall more under the purview, likely under the district attorney's office and under the children's court, to make a determination that there needs to be follow-through in lieu of outright dismissal.
Okay. So then you might not have any information about the other question that I have too, is in terms of, what do we know about these kids' families? Do they have any involvement with CYFD? Are they foster kids? That kind of thing.
Mr. Chair, Representative, oftentimes there is history with CYFD. A lot of times, ultimately, ultimately the problems begin in the home, I believe. I believe that the problems almost invariably begin at home in one way or another. Unstable home environments, lack of supervision, drugs in the home, family violence in the home. Those are all issues. And there are often CYFD referrals for child abuse or drug use, in addition to the JPO referrals for the criminal citations for the children. Often that is the case, yes.
And then the other question that I have is, you also spoke about social media. They use social media to sort of brag about what they're doing. Do you think that it's possible, or do you think that prohibitions on that kind of thing on social media would help?
Mr. Chair, Representative, to clarify, you're asking, do I think prohibitions related to social media specifically, or the platforms, or I'm not sure?
Yeah, I'm sorry. So do you think that laws governing what kids are allowed to post on social media would help reduce what these kids are doing?
I would be wary of that, and I'm sure there's a First Amendment issue somewhere in that. I don't think that would necessarily help, because ultimately, when you create a social media account, one of the things that they always ask for is, what's your date of birth or what's your age? And it's very easy to say, I'm 18 or 35 or 89 when you're really 13 or 14 years old. And then the social media platform has held up their end of the bargain. They say, well, what are we supposed to do? Background checks on everybody that signs up for Instagram? So no, I don't think that would be a practical way to combat that problem.
And how many kids are we talking about, Mr. Chair?
How many kids are we talking about?
How many kids are we talking about that you come into contact with, that you talked about in your presentation?
Mr. Chair, Representative, the presentation itself covered maybe a half a dozen children to 10 children for the presentation itself. The number of children that are engaging in this behavior here in Las Cruces is easily in the dozens. I would suspect it's probably closer to over 100 kids that are actively engaged in that type of violent behavior, regardless of if they're necessarily on my radar yet or not.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you both for your presentation, and thank you for the the leadership and the response of Las Cruces Police Department. I want to echo the same sentiments as the chairman. You have made us very proud, especially in the wake of the Young Park tragedy and your response to that. But Las Cruces Police Department's doing good things, and we see that, so thank you. I also appreciate that you arrived here in front of this legislative body and didn't just present to us the problems that are plaguing your city, but you came with hard proposed solutions. You are clearly laying down the solutions of what you believe would eliminate, at least alleviate some of these problems that you're seeing, and I appreciate that. My question, therefore, may be more from my colleagues and I, so that I can better understand the system. I appreciate Representative Romero's question about competency. I too, Mr. Chairman, would like to see some more discussion on that. To the co-chair's credit, she did a great job this last legislative session increasing competency standards for adults. And I think that we're going to see a positive, outcomes because of that bill. And if we could mirror something like that to address our youth offenders, I'd like to continue those conversations as well and hopefully get something like that. Restricting access to firearms always gives me pause. And I'll tell you, Chief had a hard sell to me, even on Glock switches, because I would rather target a criminal than the weapon itself. But, I came around. If the destruction of such device was causing that much harm, and the reality is those most law-abiding citizens aren't using Glock switches for a level of protection. So even on the handgun proposals that you're proposing here under the age of 18, I read the details in fine print to see how would this affect my two daughters. I have a 15 and a 17-year-old traveling back today alone in a vehicle with rifles coming back from a antelope hunt. They'd be exempt from any of this. So our law-abiding, even children, youth hunters, sporting activities, they'd be exempt from this as well. And so this is something that I would also equally support. I'd like to ask my colleague, Senator Reed, if you can give a quick update on the telephonic harassment. Did that die on the House floor before it traveled to the Senate or after passing all committees?
No, Mr. Chairman and Senator, we filed it a little late. We actually got through House Judiciary on it and CPAC, and I think it was well received. We need to update the digital media part of it, and it just got stuck on the floor, ran out of time. So I do have plan on bringing that back again, and we'll be probably filing that very early, I guess in the 60-day.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Chair and Representative. And if we have legislation that's traveled already through House Judiciary, we've worked out some kinks here, if we can also hear bills like that in the interim so that we can fast track those solutions through the next session, I think that that's beneficial to us all, is to prioritize those bills, and at least in the areas that we think that we can all find agreement. I'd say the same thing on the proposed gang activity. So I just want to thank you for your presentation. Also earlier today, we had an opportunity to tour the John Paul Taylor facility, and they propose solutions. We talk about here we have failed our children when they reach the level of when they come in interaction with you. You mentioned intervening through CYFD calls from a very young age. That's where we can intervene and get these kids off a different track. The John Paul Taylor site, the staff there said many times that increasing the sentencing, we give them 1 year, and that's not enough time to get these children on the right path. A minimum of 2 years. At the minimum, they'd like to see them 3 or 4. They can actually have a meaningful impact and change these kids' lives. So there's ways that we can intervene very early so that it doesn't reach this level. In the meantime, we have a criminal element, these juvenile offenders, and we need to attack both sides of those. And so I will say this, I think that the seriousness of the crimes that you're bringing forward certainly rise to the level of addressing stuff like this during a special session. I would say juvenile crime and CYFD, the crisis that we're seeing at CYFD. And if there were ever a reason for us to convene for a special session, these are the type of issues that I think most New Mexicans would agree that we need to prioritize. So thank you again for your time and the work that you're doing out in our community.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Excellent presentation. The graphics really bring it home. A couple of questions. How many juveniles have you all been able to prosecute federally?
Mr. Chair, Representative. Within the last 2.5 years, between the gang task force, the FBI gang task force that we're a part of, I believe we're at 13 children prosecuted federally in that last 2 years, which may or may not sound like a big number. It is a big number for federal prosecutions, especially for juveniles.
And Mr. Chair, and so you got 13 prosecuted. How many slipped through the system?
Mr. Chair, Representative, how many slipped through the state system? How many slipped through the federal system? I'm sure.
Let's start with the state system, and then if you had some slip through the federal system, that'll work too. But I guess I should have clarified the state system. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, Representative, almost invariably the need for federal prosecution is preceded by the failures of prosecution on the state level. So I would say at some level, and I don't have the numbers in front of me and I don't have the cases in front of me, but off the top of my head, almost all of those cases have had a failed prosecution on the state level that required a federal prosecution. Some of those prosecutions were for the Glock switches prior to the state statute being passed in this last session, and they were charged federally for that offense. But even in those instances, there was a lengthy criminal history in the state of New Mexico prior to that federal prosecution.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I, being somewhat familiar with the federal system, I would be interested on your thoughts on mandatory sentencing.
Mr. Chair, Representative, I'm not sure I'm qualified to speak on mandatory sentencing because I'm not a judge and I'm not a prosecutor. I will say it's probably helpful to have more thought put into specific sentences. I think sentencing guidelines are powerful. They're a powerful negotiating tool during plea agreements. I'm not sure that I'm for or against mandatory sentencing in one way or another, because that's really not the part that I deal with when it comes to this. My job is to investigate the crimes and try and hold people accountable at the front end of it, and then work with my partners on the back end of it and hope for the best outcome for everybody.
Thank you. And then, Mr. Chair, the hammer to federal sentencing is the guaranteed time served on many of these crimes, and that's why I don't want to pin you down. I understand that's not your job, and I apologize if that's an uncomfortable question. I didn't mean to do that. When I quickly pulled up 18922, which breaks down into the firearm laws federally, and I noticed that quite a few of the things you'd like to see changed are similar to those laws. Would that be an accurate statement?
Often, yes. The federal system often has laws on the books that we need to rely on because there is no such state statute. A perfect example of that would be the Glock switches, the weapon conversion devices prior to this last legislative session. Up to that point, it was de facto legal to own a machine gun in the state of New Mexico because there was no law in the books prohibiting that at the state level.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for this presentation. And I just really want to applaud the chairman for bringing you here to present this, because I think a lot has been said, whether it's in the media or whether it's in the committee or on the floor, about what's happening with juvenile crime and the crisis that we're facing. But it seems that when certain individuals say it, it's not credible until we hear it from people that are fighting on those lines and on the streets every single day. So thank you so much. These are great solutions. I hope that we take these solutions seriously to try to advance them this session. I agree, and I will echo what Senator Brantley says about this being a crisis. And if we needed a special session for anything, it's for juvenile crime, it's for CYFD. That's what needs to be done. People are dying every single day. And I think that we need to hold these individuals accountable. And I don't know why we continue to hold or try to hold the weapons themselves responsible for these crimes and taking people's lives instead of the individuals pulling the triggers, taking these lives. And I don't understand why the word accountability is only used when we're talking about guns being in the wrong hands of irresponsible juveniles, instead of holding accountability in the hands of the juveniles committing these crimes. They need to be held accountable. I think there was a question with how many juveniles are committing crimes or that you've dealt with. How many does it take to care? How many lives taken are enough? I think one life taken is enough for me, not how many lives are taken or how many people is this affecting. I think we're failing juveniles when we're not holding them accountable because they're committing more violent crime after violent crime, and they get a slap on the wrist. They're not held accountable. And so when they do turn 18, they think they can do the same thing with a slap on the wrist. But they are finally then facing accountability and then a life behind bars instead of 2 years in a juvenile facility or 4 years in a juvenile facility and seeing true change. I hope, and I would ask my colleagues across this table, because I know that I've seen now for a couple meetings, you guys referring to each other on working on legislation, on working on addressing juvenile crime. But I know that we, and I'll say we, the Republicans that have brought legislation for a number of years already forward, haven't been included in those decisions. And we've done a lot of research. We've talked to chiefs, we've talked to sheriffs, we've talked to juvenile facilities, a lot for years. And so I would just hope that, again, we're invited, because legislation that we brought forward has died in its first committee or hasn't even been heard in any committee. And so again, I just want to thank you for your presentation today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's good to see you again. Thanks for the presentation. I was going to just kind of talk a little bit about what I know about juvenile competency and the problems that I have seen over the years doing this. There just isn't, you do these evaluations, and because these kids sometimes are younger, often it is the evaluator comes back saying they're just not old enough to, comprehend this or that. And, times are changing, but there's nothing. Whenever they get dismissed because they're not competent, you're right, they're just dismissed, and the kids are just turned back out on the street, and then it just keeps happening. And then the next time they get a case, you see they were found incompetent, another eval gets done. And I think we're at a point now, Mr. Chairman, that we need to start probably looking at a provision that is similar to our adult provision. If we can prove that, let's say they're not competent and they're not going to be competent for a while, but yet they're dangerous, and we have that route to take them to a dangerousness hearing. Maybe it's reviewed every 2 years. As they get older, they'll probably be competent, and start looking at avenues like we're treating adults, and maybe treatment somewhere where we're not just throwing them in the streets, assisted outpatient treatment, whatever it may be. We've got to start taking a look at the times have just changed, and you're absolutely right. These kids come back not competent, and they're just turned to the street. And so I hope we can actually start thinking about some avenues to handle especially these violent offenders, because there's no reason. And I always wondered why there wasn't anything we could do with them, but why is there not a way we can take them down the dangerous route and put them in a youth facility and try to treat them to competency, and then review that. Maybe it's a year for a kid, and if they're competent, we go back and we can now go to trial or whatever we need to do with them. So I like the idea. I think that that's a big gap in our system. Always thought it was. So I'm happy to help with that in any way, but we need to start really looking at that. So, and again, I echo Senator Brantley's position, saying that I love that you come with some solutions, because we're always looking for solutions. So again, good to see you. See you soon. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I will just reiterate what I did last time, that usually conversations start within your inner circle. And I'm pretty open to having additional conversations. Have never been part of an exclusive club. So that being said, because I continue to get told about that. I have a question, though, in regards to I saw that you think that we should, or you're suggesting that we should add in gang involvement. It seems to me that the crimes that they're committing are already crimes that could result in criminal penalties. And so I'm trying to figure out, like, what is the gang relation? What would be the added impact of doing that, other than maybe an enhanced sentence, which is pretty limited the way that we have our juvenile laws written right now. So if you could just kind of talk on why you think that would be helpful.
Mr. Chair, Madam Senator, sorry. In reference to the gang enhancement stuff, I think it is necessary to find a way to disincentivize specifically gang behavior. You're absolutely right. The crimes they're committing are already crimes. They already have a punishment attached to them, or a potential punishment. Finding a way to further disincentivize gang activity specifically, because that's the root of a lot of these issues. I spoke about internet clout. Part of that internet clout is the gang culture. So they create these gangs either based off of gangs that they grew up with around their family that have been here in southern New Mexico for decades, maybe in some instances. Oftentimes they will create their own gangs. But that gang culture that, again, they emulate and they glorify is a big driver. Then you have gang-related violence where you've got two gangs that have a problem. For instance, we had a homicide a couple of years ago where a gang member was gunned down by a rival gang. And in the aftermath of that, we had a huge increase in the number of drive-by shootings, shooting at motor vehicles, gunshot victims, all of those things as retaliated because of the gang-on-gang violence. So finding a way to disincentivize that lifestyle as a whole, I think is necessary. So you're absolutely right. They are committing crimes that are already on the books, and those crimes already have punishments attached. Finding a way to put the spotlight on enhanced sentencing, which again, as you mentioned, for juveniles, the options are more limited, but they are not zero. So gang counseling, treatment, other things that are mandatory as part of a gang enhancement for a juvenile, and then for adults, same thing. We can do the gang counseling, you can do that, or there can be added time based on the gang activity to try and alleviate it or disincentivize it from the older generation working its way down.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Mr. Chairman, gentlemen, one of the things that has been proposed, and I'm trying to work through with different district attorneys, is to increase the age up to 25. So up through 25, which would be 24 and 364 days, right? Once you turn 25, then you would be out. Right now, I think we're up to 21. Up through 25 would give us the ability to provide services for a longer period of time. So I'm hoping that that's one thing that we can look at. My district attorney has suggested that we add attempted. So under the youthful offender, there's A through N crimes that are already listed, A through M crimes that are already listed. She's suggested that we add in an N that would be attempted any of those crimes that are listed. What are your thoughts about that? I mean,
Mr. Chair, Madam Senator, I think that would be a powerful step in the right direction, because giving the courts the opportunity, or more of an opportunity, more flexibility to impose adult sanctions on some of these kids, the added flexibility can be powerful. They know that in the children's court and under the children's code, like they are not likely to receive a long term of incarceration, and that there is an absolute maximum under the children's code that they can serve, like you said, up until 21, and in most cases it's far below that in reality. I think increasing the jurisdiction of the children's court up to 25 would be a powerful way to like you said, increase the services and try and keep them after they lose jurisdiction out of the children's court, to prevent them from becoming these repeat offenders that we deal with on the adult side over and over and over again. If their case began as an adult because they're out there doing all of these drive-by shootings, these murders, the homicides, aggravated batteries, having that jurisdiction up until 25, I think, is a good idea.
thank you, Mr. Chairman and gentlemen. I think when we think about kids, and you mentioned this earlier, that if they're 16 and they're committing a drive-by shooting, then they've had potentially 16 years to learn that behavior. And 6 months, 9 months, a year is hardly enough time to change behavior. Sometimes that kind of behavior takes a lifetime to try to adjust to. So my last area of questioning for you guys is and again, I want to say thank you, because when I was put responsible for implementing adult use cannabis, you guys helped me get rid of the first facility down here in Las Cruces who was selling dots before cannabis was allowed to be sold, and pretending like those dots could then be transferred for cannabis and that they weren't selling anything. So thank you for that. You guys were really instrumental in stopping that. But in my community, Chief Joy I've had a lot of conversations with him and his staff. Their concern is that we don't have enough facilities, beds. I hate to say beds because that seems really cold. I don't mean it that way, but we don't have enough places that juveniles can be detained for any period of time. So in Santa Fe, we pay for 6 beds in San Juan, whether they're used or not. And what's happened over the course of just a couple of months, the information I have and that was brought forward to this committee last month, is that we have multiple juveniles that are involved in violent actions, including actions with guns, and there's not any facilities for them to go to. I know you have facility here for pretrial detention. Are you guys experiencing those kinds of concerns at all? Yeah.
Mr. Chair, Madam Senator, in terms of the housing for kids that are detained pre-trial, typically no. Typically, we are not running into an issue where the Oneonta County Detention Center, which is the center down here, is running into issues for lack of space. Typically, though, my understanding is there's arrangements with El Paso County and things like that, where at the worst case scenario, arrangements could be made to move people around if needed. But I do agree that if we're working in the interest of holding more kids accountable, that is likely to end up with more kids being placed in a facility. And if we don't have the room in the facilities, it's a moot point. Currently, my understanding right now is that we have 3 real facilities: Albuquerque, Doñana, and I believe Hobbs, maybe 4. New Mexico is a large geographic state. I don't think that's going to cut it. And there's going to be, this is a multifaceted issue, Mr. Chair, Madam Senator, that is going to require a lot of thought, and the infrastructure behind it is going to be part of the puzzle to solve.
Thank you. My time's up. Appreciate
Thank
you
you,
guys.
Representative Anaya, then Representative Ferrari.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, gentlemen. In particular, thank you for the videos, unfortunately, but I think they bring a pretty real perspective to what's happening. And I have some comments more than questions. I've been thinking really hard about juvenile crime as a whole in relation to an experience that I had recently with a young person in my life. But I couldn't help but think about juvenile crime, and while watching these videos, think what's happening to our young men and boys in particular, because we have a lot of young girls who also experience the same types of trauma, the same intersections with CYFD, could have the same access to guns as well. And so I'm really thinking hard about what is it that we're experiencing with young men and boys in particular. So it brings me to my to the story with a young person in my life. We were hanging out, we were playing with toys, and every time we were like, I was trying to pretend, and I was like, yeah, we're gonna go to dinner, and da-da-da. Every end of each little scene that we were playing ended with something really violent, like, yeah, and then I shot them, or yeah, and then I stabbed them, and I was like, whoa, 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 we don't play like that when you play with Diamante, okay? But it was wild to me, because I was going, what is going on here? This is wild. And a lot of what this child, really he's 12, experiences from, you know, his household. His parents are super adamant about him, you know, being tough and being strong, and essentially anytime he does something that is considered vulnerable, it's equated to being a girl or being feminine, right? So to me, I'm like, what are we doing? I know this committee and generally politics hates talking about gender, but like, what are we doing to young boys that makes them feel like they have to go to this extreme to not be a girl or to not be feminine or to not be vulnerable? And I think that's something that, you know, you can't legislate, but it's something that we should consider, especially as we're talking about, you know, different types of reintegration programs. What does it mean to teach healthy masculinity within those reintegration programs? And so I'll stop there, Mr. Chair, but I just think that's something that we have to consider as we're talking about rehabilitating our young folks after, you know, after they're held accountable. They're gonna come back into society, and what does it mean to teach healthy masculinity? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, officers, for, you know, your concerted efforts on this issue. And I agree with, you know, having stricter gun enhancements on gangs and making sure that, I mean, we have past safe storage for guns. Sometimes they'll still get them, but I don't think we are able to reach, you know, as many people as we need to on that. But also, I think with this age group, also we need to look at underage drinking, because in a lot of firearm or shootings, whether they're adults or children, that gives them the courage to do these horrific things. And so I think we need to work on some prevention things as well. And the 3 teenagers that were killed at Young Park, I know there had been videos that we've seen of how enforcement had gone there many times, and how we need to increase what we, how we support our enforcement officers. And I know it's hard to recruit and get, you know, people trained, but it seems like that is part of the deterrence. You know, if young people can't congregate, well, there were some older people too, but you know, if there's not a way to congregate and have that kind of expression with guns, and make sure that they understand that there is enforcement, and going back to swift, certain, and severe to the laws that we already have, that we won't have like this one young man who, you know, had so many offenses, and for us to work out the competency, but also to make sure that we can give the time necessary to rehabilitate these young people, to get them, you know, so that the judiciary or judges will, you know, assign them to treatment and to a facility where they are given the time. I met a young man who had killed someone, and after a year, he finally started understanding what had happened. He was still under 18, but getting that understanding and changing his life around, I think, is something that we need to give youth a chance, but yet not to let them continue to offend. So thank you, and I look forward to working more on some of these suggestions of legislation. Thank you.
Representative Anu Nornu.
All right.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And thank you, Sergeant Renteria and Officer Burling, for this presentation. It was very heartbreaking but also very eye-opening as well. I just wanted to ask a really quick question, kind of expanding on some of the competency issues raised by Representative Reeb and Representative Ferrari. Do you know why, with regard to the case of this very young man who racked up, 49 charges in 5 years and was deemed incompetent every time, do you know why the DA did not pursue involuntary commitment for that young person?
I would say, Mr. Chair, Madam Representative, I don't know. I wish I knew. I wish I had the power to have influence over those decisions. I don't. I know there are options out there for involuntary commitment like you talk about, but it's not something that I have seen implemented. I'm not sure the logistics behind it. I'm not sure what the findings need to be between the DA's office or the Children's Court for that to occur in terms of this particular child. It's a clear example of a systemic failure for him. I don't know why. And I don't know, I mean, it's possible that there was an instance of involuntary commitment at some point over his childhood, but it clearly was ineffective based on how everything ended up.
Thank you, and I'll be honest with you, Mr. Chair, I didn't really anticipate you knowing the concrete answer why, but if ever there was an instance where that would be worth pursuing, it's definitely a case like this, and I just want us to start thinking really seriously about why these children are slipping through the cracks when, if ever there was one that needed some really real intervention, it would be that one. So thank you very much for the time.
Thank you.
Senator Sadia Lopez.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation, and thank you for bringing solutions from your perspective. I always think that legislation from the people who are actually affected and have to implement it is always really great. And I guess I did want to say something about competency with children. That's so hard because developmentally, I don't know, it's really hard, and I agree we have to work on it, but it is different from adult competency because I think you can treat a child to competency where often you can't treat an adult to competency. But, just because the passage of time. But I actually had a specific question about one of the proposals. Invest in and empower JPOs. Empower JPOs to issue arrest orders upon a showing of probable cause that a violation of a condition of probation or condition of release has occurred. Doesn't that, I guess I'm confused about what this adds. Right now, the JPO contacts the judge and a warrant is issued, right? Or how does, I guess I'm confused about how this works.
Mr. Chair, Madam Senator, my understanding is that they do not go directly to the judge. They will file a probation violation, the paperwork on their end through JPO, file it with the district attorney's office. The district attorney's office will evaluate it and make a determination if they will proceed. They will then present it to the Children's Court, at which point they may seek a warrant from a judge, or the judge may issue a bench warrant. But again, that process is not a timely process, and that is the problem, and that's what I'm asking for. What I think would be helpful is that, again, on the adult side, I can call a probation officer directly. They run it up their flagpole, and within a very short amount of time, usually within an hour, usually less than that, I can have an arrest order at the jail saying they're authorized for detention based on a finding of probable cause that they violated their probation.
I thought it worked that way with children as well. So that I appreciate that explanation, because I did think, well, wait, I don't understand how is this different. So just in the future, when you're giving this the solution, what happens now versus what could happen, and why does the DA need to get involved again? Because what's the theory of getting the DA involved again?
No, Mr. Chair, Madam Senator, if I knew, I would
We
tell
wouldn't
you.
have to do this. Yeah. We wouldn't have to do this. Okay.
I wish I knew the answer. I do not know. Again, that's how it's set. I'm not sure if that's written in the legislature itself. I'm not sure if that's a policy thing here in Doña Ana County. I could not tell you, but I will tell you that that's the common practice.
I'll look into it. I'm not positive that's the practice in Bernalillo County. The times I did children's law, we represented children. And my impression was that the JPO could get him in jail in a day. But the truth is that may not have been, I don't know if the DA was involved. I don't think so. But generally, but I agree with you, that should change. It doesn't make sense, because one of the things is when there's an action, you want to have a consequence quickly, especially with this age group. So no, I really appreciate the presentation, and it was really upsetting to see that. We don't see that every day, and I think it's important for you to share with us what you see. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think we've been through everybody on the list. Thank you for a good discussion. A couple of things. One is tomorrow, and I'm hoping most of you can stay. I know it's a 3-day, and I know it's hard to do 3 days, particularly when you've come a long way, many of you from a northern part of the state down south. But tomorrow we'll have Judge Duran, who is the judge who hears most of the juvenile cases here, and we'll have the district attorney back in, Fernando Macias, with the focus on looking at things like competency, amenability, and so forth. So I think that'll be a really good presentation. And now I want to invite you, gentlemen, if you can, and the department can be present again today or tomorrow for some of that dialogue and discussion, because I think that's useful. And there will naturally be some tension between the judge and the district attorney on these issues. One, that's kind of what you all know I enjoy a little bit of. I attended the Young Park, the shootings in Young Park. I attended the hearing on motions to detain, and I went to that hearing because, of course, we've heard so much over the last several years about pretrial detention. I wanted to see how it worked in practice, and it happened when Mr. Macias was relatively new as the DA, and he did the hearings. He was the attorney who actually did the hearings himself, and Judge Duran was the judge on those, and she detained those individuals. And it's interesting to me because when it comes to detention, we see, to me, very disparate results from different judges, different prosecutors in different parts of the state, very candidly. What's going to get you held in Hobbs and Eddy and Carlsbad is going to be different. What gets you held in Bernalillo County, if you shoot at a politician's house, you're going to get detained, and that individual did. If you're down in the valley and you shoot at somebody's house, it's go back to work kind of thing, right? So it doesn't work. It doesn't make sense, and it shouldn't to any of us. So I do look forward to maybe talking to Judge Duran and Mr. Macias tomorrow about this competency and the determination. I'm naturally concerned, and always have been, that we have a different system of justice in the federal courts, and that's part of the reason why I asked you all to be here today, is that when talking with Chief Story and Mr. Macias and others, the cases are going to be prosecuted in federal court because they're getting the relief that they think is necessary from a federal judge or in a federal system that they're not getting in a state court. And I don't know whether it's different psychologists that we're using or some different standard of competency, but we'll find out. We want to get to the bottom of that because we're clearly getting different results. On the subject of gun safety laws, I do appreciate this last session. I think I was getting close to the apocalypse and watching for the horsemen coming and all that, because I introduced a gun bill that actually had Republicans vote for it. And I think Senator Brantley was referring to that too. And generally speaking, for example, the background check bill, I was the sponsor of that, the original bill requiring a background check. Unfortunately, I think it was a party line vote. And I think all my Republican colleagues voted against it, and I think my Democrat colleagues voted for it. And it shouldn't be that way, because you're asking us to enhance that law even a bit beyond the background checks. And I'm hoping we're going to get there. I've always thought that the way we're going to get to sensible gun laws is by having law enforcement take the lead. And I'll explain. You all go out on the streets every day, and you put your lives at risk. And I can't imagine the sacrifice that we're asking you to make to you and your families by doing that. But I want you to know how much we respect that. And the one thing that is inconceivable to me is that you're out on the streets and outmanned and outgunned. We would never let our military go against an adversary and have fewer arms and lesser weapons than our adversary, and yet we do that with you all every day, right? We send you out in the streets, and your adversaries have better arms than you do and more of them. I'm looking forward to the day when I'm hearing a little bit from what I'm hearing from you today was protect us, right? Protect us with some sensible gun laws, because that's how we're going to get gun laws, and that's how we're going to get over this partisan divide. This whole notion that any gun laws, Democrat-led and Republican-opposed and so forth, we can get over that, but we're going to have to be smart and creative, and we're going to need your help. And we're going to need you guys to say we don't want to have those kind of weapons on the streets, and we shouldn't. I'm kind of somewhat happy to hear that maybe that's where we can get some of this changed a little bit, particularly when you're talking about age of ownership and different firearms. We don't have a sensible law on that, right? You can have a handgun, but you can't have you can't have a handgun, but you can have a long gun under the age of 18 or under 19. It doesn't make any sense, right? And you're pointing that out to us. You're facing the other end of a shotgun just as much as you're facing the other end of a 9mm. And to you, what difference does it make, right? But yet our law somehow distinguishes between the two, and it really shouldn't. So I look forward to these kind of discussions, and really, as this committee, I hope this continues to come together. We had some division today. We'll inevitably at times have some very difference of opinions on things, but I hope that the participation here brings us together a little bit. The telecommunication, we'll talk about that. I'm sure I appreciate you coming to us with suggestions. We should never look down on any suggestions negatively. I'll tell you, the gang activity, I introduced a gang bill at the request of Mayor Marty Chavez. That tells you how long I've been doing this in Albuquerque, a very long time ago. By the end of that session, I thought it was a hazing request, because you've noted in your slide, how do you define what is a gang? And of course, we have a constitutional right to protect association. And so when you protect the right of association, you can't define a gang by the clothes you wear, or by the tattoos you have, or by you can't do those things constitutionally, right? So how do you get there? It becomes really challenging. We've had some attempts recently on defining what a gang is, and they usually get shot down. But again, I think it's a real problem. We were at Paul Taylor today, and that was one of my questions for the people there, is what is the gang saturation at J. Paul Taylor? And they assured me that it wasn't significant, but it's there, right? And we've got to get to the bottom of all that too. Interesting, I note for my committee's benefit, and again, to get me in trouble with the executive branch sometimes, but none of the laws we've talked about today or proposed today were anything that were part of the special session that was so urgent last year, or that frankly, I and others got so criticized for not passing immediately afterwards in our town hall. I'm looking at Donna, you and others. I appreciate you all, but I was there with the governor, and I took the licking there, and then I had my own town hall, and you all came to that too, and your chief did as well too. But I note that we've got to come up with laws that really are going to do something, and I note that everything you're proposing here would seem to do something to me, and interesting, a lot of things that we thought were so important last year have gone away, panhandling being one of them, I guess. The mandatory sentencing is an interesting issue we should talk about. I'll try and put that back in here. The feds have mandatory sentencing in a way that states don't, and for as many years I've been here, I've argued we should give judges a lot of discretion. But sometimes we don't. The only area I think we don't give judges very much discretion is on DWI. And in sentencing on DWI, judges really don't have very much discretion at all. And I think there's a lesson in there. Why did we decide that on DWIs, we tell in our statute, judge, you cannot plea down a certain version of DWI, certain offenses. You can't plea it down. You can't reduce it. You can't. And why do we do that with judges? Well, the honest answer, and well, this will get me in a lot of trouble, as a guy who appears in front of judges all day long. We don't know that we trust the judges to impose a harsh enough sentencing. So we tell them you don't have any discretion on that. And I got to tell you, when I talk to judges, a lot of times they're kind of happy that they don't have that discretion. They kind of like the fact that they don't have to make that call on a DWI, because they sometimes realize that it's somebody they know, or somebody that or an offense that could have happened to them, or whatever. So I've had more than a few judges say, yeah, we're kind of glad our hands are tied on this. I don't know that's a good solution, but I do want to be careful with getting myself in trouble with the judges. But I've always argued for judicial discretion, and yet more than a few times of late, I wonder whether judges sometimes do not reflect the will of the electorate and the communities which they serve, whether they've lost touch with that. I think that's true of some judges. I think some judges have lost touch with what the community expects in terms of a safe society and a safe community. And I say that with a lot of risk to myself, but I'm not gonna name names. But you all know who they are, and we talk about them, and we talk about them in private in the back room. Oh, that's Judge so and so. Yep, they slap on the wrist, Judge, right? Or alternatively, and our system shouldn't work that way. Our system shouldn't work where if you get the right judge on the right day of the week or whatever, that you're going to get a different result than somebody else is going to get in a different circumstance. And we've got to figure out a way to try and do that because, as you point out, the youth figure that out, right? They know they're not going to get in trouble, and they take advantage of it too. So I think that we have to recognize that there is politics in criminal justice. I see you nodding your head. I see the folks in the audience nodding your head. I hate to admit it, but it's true. The composition of a city council changes the way that crime is enforced in the city of Las Cruces. The composition of the county commission changes the way laws are enforced in Las Cruces. It has changed. It has changed in Albuquerque, the same. It has changed in Santa Fe, the same. I see my colleagues from Santa Fe. Everybody's nodding their head, but nobody will say it. But they'll say it privately. Who your mayor is, who your city council is, who your county commission is, determines whether you're going to have strict crime enforcement or not. And it filters all its way down through judges, and that's not going to be a popular message that gets out there, but somebody's got to say it. And I see a lot of heads nodding the affirmative. I've made the point. Same state laws are in Hobbs and Roswell and Eddy County. Same state laws as Las Cruces and Albuquerque. And yeah, it's right. It changes by DAs and it changes, but the state laws are the same. And the only point I make there is the solution is not going to come entirely by changing state laws because we have the same state laws that you all do in your part of the state, and you have a very different result in terms of crime with the same state laws. So we need to be recognizing that it comes down to you all, it comes down to district attorneys, it comes down to judges. And so, again, I think I speak for the whole committee. We appreciate your service. Those of you that are colleagues here in the room who are not at the table and who are back at the office for you and the people out on the street every day, we appreciate you very much. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, thank you.